So everyone, thank you so much for coming out today. So excited. Really excited for this talk about the power of gratitude today. For those who are kind of live in the Zoom room, put yourself in the gallery mode so you could see everyone. And before we start, click on the chat, enter your name, your company, what city you're coming from. And if you're coming from Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn Live, you can kind of introduce yourself in the comments as well. And you can interact with us almost like you're in the live Zoom room by just kind of adding comments into the Zoom room, in the chats, and I'll be kind of monitoring that as well. So for this next exercise, for regulars, you know what we normally do. We do a quick kind of a survey or to the group who are live in the room. So top right hand side, make sure you're on gallery so you see everyone. And you're going to raise your hands if it's a yes, right? So if you're on live stream or LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, you can either type in yes in the comments, or you can just use the raise your hand emoticon in the comments. Okay, ready? So raise both hands if it's a yes. How many of you have ever ruminated or obsessed over something negative that happened to you in the past, replaying it over and over in your head? I see Katie raising her hand right away. How many of you have found yourself working hard to achieve a goal? I'm gonna hear a lot of yeses on this one. How many of you have found yourself working hard to achieve a goal, reaching that goal, and immediately moving to achieve another goal? Essentially moving the goal line even further. Raise your hand. Okay, got a lot of type A personalities on this call, I can tell. How many of you have difficulty finding gratitude during trying times or hardship? Okay. How many of you count your blessings before they go to bed and when they wake up? How many of you have a gratitude journal? How many of you have a strong support network, either at work, home, or in your community? Basically, how many of you have a network of cheerleaders in your lives? Love that, love that. Okay, so for the next part, if you can put this in speaker mode, so you probably just see me. I'm gonna mute everyone right now. And awesome, well, thank you so much for everyone coming out today. I want to thank everyone for sharing their experience with gratitude just now. Today's Let's Talk is on the power of gratitude and how it can literally change your life. Before I begin this, I really want to focus on one quote that I thought was really fitting for this conversation. We posted this quote on the Community of Seven social page a few months ago. Many of you kind of follow the post that we have either on Facebook or LinkedIn. And this is the quote: "We either make ourselves miserable or we make ourselves strong. The amount of work is the same." Let me repeat that. We either make ourselves miserable or we make ourselves strong, and the amount of work is the same. So I found that quote to be really powerful when I first read it, because it really reframed how our interpretation of a situation or an experience is so powerful. When I coach executives in my core communities, one of the core concepts that I cover is Pareto's principle. Many of you guys have heard it. It's also known as the 80-20 rule. It's used in many different types of contexts, from productivity to wealth distribution and on and on and on. For the past 2 decades, I've been using it in terms of leading my teams. And this is how I've been using it. When I coach my team, I always tell them that 20% of their time should be focused on the problem, and 80% of the time should be focused on the solution. So once again, 20% of your time should be focused on the actual problem, but a majority of your time, 80% of your time, should actually be focused on how do you solve this problem. And I think a majority of people are the reverse. they spend 80% ruminating about the problem and only 20% focusing on the solution. So what that usually leads to is overwhelm. And in the past year, working with a lot of executives and different, folks that I've coached, I'm noticing that there's a lot of sense of overwhelm. Nod your head if you've been kind of feeling overwhelmed this past year, right? People are overworked, working from home, there's no boundaries, right? There's also this fear of like dying with the pandemic happening. And so I recently watched this interview with this author who studied the topic of overwhelm, the feeling and the emotion of overwhelm. And she used this really powerful analogy that I want to share with you. Most people treat emotions as a cave, meaning they feel that emotion and they kind of, like a cave, let it overwhelm them. And what she said is that people should treat their emotions like a tunnel. We all need to respect the feeling, whether it's overwhelm, fear, depression, but we have to kind of go through that tunnel where there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I would argue to say that when we are feeling overwhelmed and discouraged, we are focusing on the problem and not the solution. We're focusing on fear and not gratitude. So in the comments right now, I want you to answer this question. Don't press send until I tell you, but I want you to answer this question in the comments. For those who are on live stream, do the same, but don't press send till I tell you. This past year during the pandemic, were you mainly focused on gratitude or fear? Just type it in, gratitude or fear. So I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1. Gratitude. I'm seeing a lot of gratitude, fear, gratitude. So it's about like an even split, right? Jane says mostly gratitude, but some fear. So while we're having this conversation with Dawn on gratitude, I want you to kind of really think about what I kind of said earlier in terms of that quote, right? We have a choice how to analyze our experiences, whether it's fear or hope, pain or suffering, play or joy. There's tons of different emotions that you can be feeling. They all take about the same amount of time. So ask yourself, how much time do you want to spend on these emotions? And I think today's conversation on gratitude is really, really important. Research by UC Berkeley scientists demonstrated that gratitude changes you and changes your brain. So new research is starting to show that gratitude works to improve our mental health. Research has zeroed in on the activity of just practicing gratitude can change the neurons and how your brain is structured. Many studies over the past decade have shown that people who consciously count their blessings tend to be happier and less depressed. And I can tell you from my experience, for those who've followed my experience, developed when I started creating Community of 7, I started the pandemic, I got laid off, I went through this huge depression, which was, I've had kind of multiple times in my life, once with postpartum depression when I had my daughter. And that cave analogy was really powerful because I remember when I was feeling that deep sense of depression at the beginning of the pandemic, I was focusing on fear. I was focusing on financial loss. I was focusing on the fact that I just lost my job. I was focusing on every negative emotion that I possibly could. And it wasn't until I pulled myself out, or I should say my daughter pulled me out, because she had said, "Mommy, I love you even without a job." And that pulled me out of that depression, because I started focusing on the fact that I had an amazing family. I focused on the fact that my faith was bigger than fear. I focused on the fact that I had amazing groups of friends, and I started to call them instead of ignoring their calls, right? And I have this one bracelet, I don't know if you can see it, but it says, "I am blessed." And it's just to kind of remind me of my blessings, opposed to the things I lacked. And so the word gratitude is derived from Latin word gratia, which means grace, gracefulness, and gratefulness, depending on the context. In some ways, gratitude encompasses all of these meanings. Gratitude is a thankful appreciation for what an individual receives, whether it's tangible or intangible. With gratitude, people acknowledge the goodness in their lives. In the process, people usually recognize that the source of the goodness lies at least partially outside of themselves, whether it's your friends, your family, God, your community, neighborhood, whatever that is. As a result, gratitude helps people connect to something larger than themselves as individuals, whether it's people, nature, or a higher power. And 3 decades ago, Martin Seligman and colleagues launched positive psychology, which was groundbreaking at that time. They began the scientific study of focusing on positive emotions like gratitude, optimism, forgiveness, happiness, compassion, and altruism. And at that time, it was revolutionary because psychology was really focused on human emotions that were negative psychology, mental illness, trauma, addiction, and stress. So as we learn to cultivate our personal attributes and really deal with adversity and emotional turmoil, we start to kind of move towards happiness and resiliency, right? But it's a practice. It's something that we really have to work on each day. So before I introduce Dawn, I also want to kind of point out to some research by Rick Hanson, who's like an award-winning author. Research shows that our thoughts have the power to actually shape and mold our brains. So the more conscious we are about perceiving an experience as positive, the more this perception will generalize to other parts of the brain, right? And one of the things that Rick mentions is that negative experiences are like Velcro. They're really sticky and they stick to our minds. Whereas positive experiences are like Teflon. They more readily slip away. Therefore, we must actively work to integrate positive experiences into the brain so that it sticks in our head and the beneficial effects can endure. So the question remains, how do we do this? So before I introduce Dawn, in the comments, once again, for those on the live stream, add it to your comments as well. I want you to answer this, but don't press send right now. I want you to answer this following question. How do you currently practice gratitude? Type that in. Don't press send yet. How do you currently practice gratitude? So for example, I journal. I say 10 things that I'm grateful for before I go to sleep and before I or when I wake up. What is your gratitude tips? Press 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, send. Meditate before I sleep. Thank God. Every morning gratitude prayer, journaling, and about 3 things I'm grateful for. Think over my day and reflect on the good. Love that. So these are kind of examples. So surrounding yourself with friends, surrounding yourself with positive people, calling up a friend, gratitude prayer. Right now, things are not easy. Even though things are getting better with the pandemic, we've just gone through a traumatic experience this past year. And I just want you guys who are on the call or on live stream right now or in the live audience to understand that it's okay to take time to take care of yourself. It's okay to pause and focus on the things that you love. It's okay to call people who will support you and be there for you. So without further ado, I am so excited to introduce today's guest, Don Williams. He's just released a book, his 4th book, Gratitude Stories from the Heart. And I'm going to add in the comments a link to it. For everyone who is watching this right now, whether you're the live audience on Zoom or on live stream on Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, You can buy his Amazon Kindle book for 99 cents. Thank you, Don. So put the link in, buy it today, and you can also pre-order his book as well. So meet Don Williams. Don is the CEO of Don Williams Global. In addition to being a 3-time #1 best-selling author, those books include Do It Yourself, Contact Center Toolbox, Romancing Your Customer, How to Attract, Retain, and Win Back Customers for Unbelievable Loyalty and Profitability, and the creators of Wow, Wow, Wow Experience. Don is a serial entrepreneur who started his first business in 1986 with capital totaling $6,000. Today, Don has founded a dozen companies. Don's client list includes international and Fortune 500 companies. Don's passion is really about helping businesses develop and provide such excellent customer experience that their market must reward them with dominance. And I'm also going to put his website, Don Williams Global, in the comments section, and also all of his social channels. So Don, you've spent 35 years as an entrepreneur consulting with Fortune 500 companies on sales, customer experience, culture, leadership, etc. You're now also a best-selling author. What is the genesis of your upcoming book, Gratitude Stories of the Heart? What is it about, and why is gratitude important? And you might want to unmute yourself.
I'm only on Zoom all day, every day, and you'd think I'd know where the mute button is. So thank you so very much for having me today. And I'll say this, that I think I'm an unlikely ambassador for gratitude. Most of my life, I've been blessed. I've been kind of like Midas. Everything I touched worked and worked well. And I should have been very grateful, but I just expected things to work well, and they did. And kind of like Lan talked about earlier, I hit my goal and then immediately just moved to a new goal or moved the goalpost further and never really celebrated. But 5 years ago, I'm invited to speak at a conference in Bangkok, Thailand, which is a good thing to be invited to. And while I'm there, I sit in on another session, and really smart lady out of Whistler, Canada, and she's talking about the effect of emotions on human performance, kind of regardless of what you're performing at, and that humans perform at their very highest when they express or experience gratitude, and at their very lowest when they express or experience shame. And that it really hit home with me that while I had been very successful in business and had a great family and had great friends, I never really had been appreciative for the blessings, that I enjoyed. And so when we got back to the States, I live outside of Fort Worth, Texas. I went to my local Home Depot and I bought this galvanized pail. I think it was $3.49. I had to make payments on it. So that's the actual pail. This is not the actual card. The card has since died, but I wrote the word gratitude on the card and put it in the pail. And this pail became my friend. And so for about 6 months, it went in the car, it went in the truck, it sat on my credenza, it sat in the den. Wherever I went, I didn't take it to the restroom or to bed, but other than that, this pail was my buddy, and I carried it around, and it was my physical reminder to practice gratitude. And I began a practice called 10-10-10, which we'll come back and talk about maybe a little later, which was a daily intentional practice of gratitude. And my vision for the book is that we influence 1 million people to begin that practice. So I'd been doing that for about 6 or 8 months, and the leadership team at my company, which at the time was about 9 people, I decided, hey, I'm going to share this with them, and I'm going to teach my people. And so we began a gratitude practice called One Good Thing. And one good thing, every Monday morning, everyone would get about a minute to stand up and share one thing they were grateful for that we didn't know from their personal life. And, so when you first start that, and I led to give an example, but, the 9 people looked around the room like, what are we doing? And most of them were very long-term employees. And so it took a while for everybody to kind of get in the groove and to begin sharing, maybe not huge events, but when you're grateful, the size of the event doesn't really matter. It's not in direct relationship to the size of gratitude. And so many times the littlest things you are the most grateful for. So we'd probably been doing that 6 or 8 months, and every week people became more candid and shared, were more vulnerable, more authentic. And so after maybe 6 or 8 months, here's a typical story. So a teammate stood up one day and said, my daughter plays soccer, and I'm grateful because last week she introduced me to her teammates. I think his daughter was 9, and he'd been going to the games for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, and she basically had ignored him, which as a parent, you've probably been there. And if not, you probably will be there. But on that weekend, she recognized her dad and introduced her new friends to her dad. And so, while that was a very small thing to everybody in the room, it was very big to him. And that's the thing he was most grateful for. So, like I said, about 6 or 8 months in, a lady who'd worked with me 15 or 20 years, we knew that her daughter was pregnant, and they were expecting Deborah's first grandchild. So what we didn't know is that the physician had told the parents that the baby suffered from a congenital defect, would probably not live to term. If the baby did live to term, would probably be stillborn. If the baby was not stillborn, the baby would perish almost immediately, and nothing could be done. We did not know that. So that week, Deborah stood up and said, I'm grateful because last week my grandson was born and lived an hour. Now, horrible, tragic, nothing you can say to make that better, about the worst thing that can happen. But she went on to say, I'm grateful because his mother and father and my husband and myself and the other grandparents were able to meet him and hold him and tell him that we loved him. And when she shared that story, I saw, that my feet were made of clay. I thought I would teach, and, I became the student. She had taken gratitude to such a totally different level. And so amongst my 4 companies, we still practice one good thing every Monday. And I have many consulting clients around the world, and all meetings start with one good thing. And if we didn't have such a big audience here today, I would have begged, pleaded, and stole.
Actually, Don, I like that idea. In the comments, tell us one good thing in the comments right now, and put one good thing. Comments for those on live stream as well. We have a few hundred, like 100 people on live stream, all the different platforms. Put what you're grateful for in right now in the comments, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, press send. One thing you're grateful for. Flowers in my backyard. Longtime friends came to visit. I started working out again. Family, having a car to drive, health. I love this. Grateful for good friends. And I'm going to read some of the ones that are on LinkedIn Live as well. Grateful for my family. Grateful for meditation. Grateful for my job. Grateful for my business. Grateful for my faith. Love that. Love this. So one of the things I want to kind of going back to that story, which is heartbreaking, but also very beautiful in that she found beauty in something that's so painful. Many of us watching this have had a traumatic time during COVID. I have one friend who lost 20 relatives due to COVID. How do you find gratitude during pain, during suffering, when you're afraid, when you've lost your job? It's easy to find gratitude when things are going well. How do you find gratitude in the darkness?
Am I answering that?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not to the audience.
Okay. I'm sorry. So obviously it's a much bigger challenge when you face something insurmountable, and nothing more insurmountable than death, and nothing more tragic than the death of an infant. But 5 years ago, when I began this, I began a practice that I learned from a really smart guy in Tucson, Arizona, Warren Rustand, and I start my day every day with what I call the 10-10-10. And so the very first thing I do when I awaken in the morning is, before I get out of bed, is I answer the question, what is my purpose for today? Now, I have a lot of businesses. I have a big thing to do list, but my purpose is not on my thing to do list. My purpose is a higher calling than that. And so I answer the question, what is my purpose for today? What do I want to be to the world? And then I spend 10 minutes in positive reading. And I'm working right now through a leadership book, of which I've read about a zillion of them. And I spend some time in the Bible. And but I don't think it really matters. 10 minutes in positive reading. And I know people that aren't readers, and they listen to a podcast or a talk, positive. And then I spend 10 minutes in gratitude and have this big long list that I recite. And I used to think I was like the gratitude king. I always had this really high opinion of myself. And then I met a lady in Singapore who recites that she's grateful. She says, I'm grateful 1,000 times before she gets out of bed every morning. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not doing that. And then I spend 10 minutes journaling things that I'm grateful for. And so to me, the easiest way to harness the power of gratitude is to be intentional with your practice. And I love I saw the suggestions where I do this before I go to bed, and I love that. And I would just encourage that if you are an end of the day gratitude person, that you add the beginning of the day. Our brains are functioning at a different wave level when we first awaken, and our little computers are wide open. And so many people come in and turn on the news, and you're like, oh my gosh, quit putting that in your brain first thing while your brain's wide open. Put something good in. And
I love that, Dot. It's so funny because before we got in, we were kind of chatting with the folks who were kind of live in the Zoom audience, right? And we were talking about morning routine. So it sounds like you have a morning routine. And there was this book I read by Hal Elrod. I don't know if you've read it. It's called Miracle Morning.
I have.
And he basically does 6 things. It's called the savers. Silence, S, which is like meditation. A, affirmations, or it could be prayers. Visualization, visualize how you want to see the day. E, exercise. R, reading. And S, scribing. And having that daily ritual is so powerful. I mentioned going through that period of depression. I started creating a schedule for me, because what I was doing during the pandemic, and nod your head if you guys were doing this as well, I would wake up, I would pick up my phone. I was in New York and Westchester at that time, which was the heart of the epidemic. in the US, and I would just read about people dying and the people getting sick and how hopeless things were. And I would just fall into this depression. And we need to sometimes break that. And so what I started doing was I created this morning routine where I kind of like, and I would call friends who are positive. And it's like that morning routine was helpful, but you have to make it a daily practice, like it's brushing your teeth. And it sounds like you kind of have that same type of ritual done.
Yeah. So I'm 5 years into my daily intentional practice of gratitude. And my only regret is that I didn't start before, but I'm grateful that I started when I did. And I basically, it kind of changed my whole persona. I used to be a person who was very easy to anger and demonstrative in my anger. If I was angry, everybody would know I was angry. And so, gratitude will pay a lot of dividends, but one is the negative emotions will show less and less in your life. And when they do show, there'll be more of a tunnel instead of a hole. You'll move through it faster. And so the book, I squeezed arm. No, I didn't. I got friends, some of whom I met on social media, and I met Lan through social media. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so some that I met through social media, literally on a Tuesday and on a Wednesday, they had submitted a story and asked if they could nominate someone else to share a story. And so probably for the first time in my life, I've tried real hard not to oversteer this project. I let people share on any subject they wanted to. And I took stories from people all over the world. And as long as they shared their heart, that was fine. And so, and then this book is a passion project. I stated very early on, we'll make no money from the book. All profits from the proceeds of the sale of the book will go to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, Memphis, Tennessee. And I can only hope Paul Newman, did that with his salad dressing line. And many years later, he said, hey, if I'd known we'd had 100 million in profits, maybe I would have done that some other way. And I think that was tongue in cheek. They probably wouldn't have got to 100 million in profits without it. But my aspiration, my prayer, my goal is even that we help one child, have better health through the sale of the book. And we're starting, I'm already into the second book. And so I'll just tell you, if you have a gratitude story, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or Smoke Signals, or I think I'm everywhere. And Lan certainly knows how to get me because, you might be a co-author on a future book.
I love that. And what this also kind of reminds me of as well is one of the things I always say is that where our eyes go, our body follows. And so, I use, the analogy of like race car drivers. When they are driving, they're taught not to look into where the crash or where the wall, they need to look away. So you need to look towards gratitude. You need to look where you want to head. And too many times, and I am guilty of this, when I am feeling negative, when I'm feeling sad or depression, I tend to kind of look towards a problem. And I think part of gratitude is focusing on the good that's here and the good that is to come, right? And also the good that surrounds us that we might not even be able to see. So Don, you are now on your fourth book, yes, which is mind-blowing, right? You've written 3 best-selling books. Tell me a little bit more about WOW and what does this mean? Seeing all of one of your quotes was that whole thing with like about showing wow moments. Tell us more about this because I'm curious.
So for 35 years, I've been in the customer experience business. And so I naturally see things from the other person's point of view. And so I'll share the concept of wow with you, and you will begin delivering better experiences today with your spouse, with your children, with your teammates, with your employees, with your employer, whoever. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, wow starts at 11, but it goes to infinity. And so literally with my clients, I want to hear the word wow. And I ask them all the time. So tell me, how was that? Was that good for you? So here's a good example. A couple of years ago, I'm flying to a conference. My wife says she'll take care of booking the tickets. And I was like, fine. And so when I get home that night, she said, I had booked us tickets on Emirates, which I had not flown Emirates at the time. And included in the price of our ticket, they're sending a driver to the house to pick us up, to take us to the airport. And I'm married to a redhead, and I should know better than to disagree with her, because she's always right and I'm always wrong. But I said, "Oh, you heard wrong. That's not what's happening. I mean, I fly a bazillion miles a year. Nobody ever sends a car, you know." But sure enough, the day we fly, there's a knock at the door, and a big black Cadillac Escalade, and a large man in a black suit, black tie, takes the bags, takes us to the airport, handles the bags. And I'm like, wow, that blows my mind. And so get on the plane. I have not even sat down yet, and I still don't know how they did this, but a flight attendant comes up to me and says, "Mr. Williams, would you like to see a wine list?" Now, I live in Dallas, Fort Worth. I fly a bazillion miles a year. It's all on American. This American's home. And, the wine list in American is red or white. What do you want, bub? Because that's what they generally, they have two of each, but they're out of one. And so it's like red or white. So I'm kind of flippant. And I tell the flight attendant, I'm like, well, if you have a wine list, I want to see it. And I'll be darned if she doesn't show me a wine list. And I'm like, well, I'll have the 04 Bordeaux, please. I mean, she not only has wine lists, but she has some quality wines. And my attitude is, wow, we've taken off. They're telling us when they're going to feed us. It's a 16-hour flight. We're flying to Dubai. And she said, but if you want to eat before, after, just let us know, because we're cooking to order. Wow, I am not on American today. Okay. And I love American. I'm not knocking American. We're over the Atlantic someplace. They're dim the cabin lights. She comes by and says, would you like a mattress? And at this point, I'm like, oh yeah, sure. I'd like, bring me a mattress. I'll be darned. She brings like a 4-inch memory foam mattress. And kind of a weird thing about me is I have this thing for fabric. I buy clothes and sheets and towels, and all based on how they feel. And unfortunately, what I think feels good is always really, really expensive. And so the sheets on this are like, I don't know, 1,500, 2,000 thread count sheets. And I'm like, wow. And so get to Dubai. 16 hours is a long time, even when you're flying luxury. And we're going to have to clear customs, which is typically a whipping, anywhere you go. But included in our ticket, so like you go to Disney World and you can get the fast pass. You can pay a little extra, and you go in the quickie line, not the long line. Well, they have the same thing for customs. Now, 90,000 passengers a day clear customs in Dubai, busiest airport in the world. And so we walk past, I don't know, 85,000 of them, and just walk right through. And I'm like, totally, totally blown away. And so when you deliver experiences of that nature, where people literally feel wow, and that can be with your spouse, that can be with your children, that can be with your friend, with your teammate, with your customer, with your prospect, you begin to kind of own the world. People like wow. And once they've had it, an 8 from somebody else doesn't feel so good. And so the easy thing about delivering wow experiences, if you just put it in your head that you want to, that part of your brain, Lance probably talked about this, your reticular activator, just by voicing it, just by thinking about it, you'll begin to do that. And whether you're looking for employment, looking for better employment, starting a job, looking to win a customer, wow will serve you well. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, go to wow and on.
I love that. It kind of tying this kind of to the topic of gratitude as well. There was actually studies done that showed that simple, like in terms of your relationship with your spouse or whatnot, just having gratitude for them, made a huge difference for employees and managers, leaders in the workforce. Part of giving a wow, I guess, experience is also to be grateful and to have gratitude for their teams. There was a study done where it was, people who do fundraising for these nonprofits. There was one group that was, just given a normal script, and then another one that their managers actually were intentional to be grateful for their efforts. And that one group where the manager showed gratitude for their team, they raised 60% more than the other group. So when you're thinking about kind of a wow kind of experience too, I think gratefulness is kind of like embedded in that as well. So those who are on this call, we probably have about 15 more minutes with the amazing Don. Do you have any questions? Let me know in the comments. If you are on live stream as well, feel free to ask yourself, and I'll be monitoring that as well in the comments. If you have kind of any specific questions, just put them in the comments. And while you are putting it in the comments, I'll kind of follow up with this. Don, we've just kind of gone through collectively this collective trauma through the pandemic. How did you what was your experience going through the pandemic, having multiple businesses, having dozens, if not hundreds of people who you had to look after their welfare, and your business is really dependent on live events and speaking engagements and going into these Fortune 500 companies to train them. Now that, how have you dealt with this, and how have you used gratitude to kind of maneuver yourself into a more positive direction as an entrepreneur?
Great question. And I'll just say this. So I was most successful with my speaking business during COVID, and little joke there, I successfully canceled every event I had booked and refunded all the money, because that's all there was to do. My clients who had hired me said, "Hey, we're not doing it." And so you just say, "I understand," and you give back their money, and we know it will come up, at some other point. And so I am a person who has words. I have a certain amount of words I have to share with people every day, or my head will explode probably. And so I did eventually start a podcast, because there I don't need a stage to share my words. And so you can catch me at Proven Entrepreneur Show if you're so inclined. In our brick and mortar businesses with employees, I think March 16th of 2020, we sent everybody home, and we own our own buildings, and so it was really painful to do that, but it was just the thing to do. And I'm in Dallas-Fort Worth, and so Texas not hit as dramatically as many other spots in the country, but still hit. And so back then, we went into at least what we would consider full shutdown. And the beauty is that my leadership team, probably through no thanks to me, we transitioned. We were basically out of operation 24 hours. And then we had tools in place to where we were actually connected much deeper with everyone being at home than we ever were with people being in the facility. And we had to bring in new tools to do that. But we made that transition so well. I'll just say this, we're never going back. I mean, I have a skeleton crew there. And if I have some people who working at home was not positive for them and they wanted to come to the facility, and I understand. Okay. And we have a big enough facility that you can sit in a 1,500 or 2,000 square foot room by yourself and you are socially distant. Okay. And we have some people that choose to do that, but the vast majority work in their home somewhere. And literally in our one good thing meeting, one of our ladies who is in finance, and Susan is, I'm not real sure, she's in her mid 70s, and we're always kidding her because her her camera, she's in her bedroom, and so it's like, okay, Susan, you're calling in from your bedroom again, and thanks for inviting us to your bedroom, but part of it's playing the cards you're dealt, and there's some things you can't overcome, and if you can look at it through the lens, through the filter of gratitude, you won't let it bother you quite so much. And there is, remember this, there is a solution. So when Lan talked about fixating on the problem instead of the solution, so in entrepreneur speak, which I can't help, I encourage my clients to crystallize the vision of where you're going. Okay, not what you have to go through to get there. And your brain and the universe or God or whatever your faith is going to help you make that vision a reality. Okay. And so one of my clients, I was on a call with her and I was like, oh my gosh, you have lost half a person. She had lost a ton of weight. And she said, I suffered with weight my whole life. But this time I've done it for real and for good. And I was like, well, tell me more about that. And she said, well, I excuse my language. She said, I ignored the suck and I just concentrated on the result. And I'm like, okay, I probably can't use that very often, but tell me what the heck that means. And she said, the suck is the painful part. I had to give up wine. I had to restrict what foods I ate. I had to do this. I had to do that. All these I had tos. Okay. And she said, and every time I've tried to lose weight in the past, that's what I fixated on was, I have to do this. Okay. And she said, that was just brutal. Okay. Because I lived in the pain. She said, this time her son was going to be married, and she decided she wasn't going to be at his wedding in this size dress, but this size dress. And she said, so I bought the dress and I hung it in my bedroom, and I just saw myself being in that dress, which I couldn't have worn in the last 30 years. Okay. And so I concentrated on my vision of where I wanted to go, not what I had to go through to get there. And so I'm not telling you don't make the plan, don't incrementalize. I think that's important, but don't fixate on it. Fix your vision on the final result. Okay. And I know it makes no sense necessarily, but it also makes no sense that humans perform at their highest when they express or experience gratitude, but it's true. Okay. And so sometimes the counterintuitive is actually a better course of action.
I love that. It kind of reminds me too of that whole, 80-20% rule where you're focusing on where you want to head. So when you look at emotion, do you focus on fear or do you focus on hope? do you focus on loss or do you focus on what you can gain? And when you focus on the things that you want in life, it's a lot easier to kind of head that way. And wherever it is, the universe, energy, whatever it is, kind of helps push you along, right? There's also this book called by James Clear called Atomic Habits that kind of like talks about this, about these small incremental 1% changes that you can make daily. And for the Community of Seven, I don't know how many of you guys joined, but we had a 1% weekly challenge because I wanted to make it even super easy, right? So instead of saying, I want to run a marathon, I want to drink a glass of water, and that's your 1% challenge. And you kind of incrementally add it. So the whole notion is creating enough traction so you can move forward. And for, you know, that example that you gave of your employee, she focused on what she wanted to head and that clear vision. And she kind of just made these incremental changes every day. So we have a quote from David Hansen. Dave, do you feel comfortable unmuting yourself and asking your amazing question to Dawn?
Sure. So I just wanted to ask you how you've created wow experiences when you're offering lower price point products and services. How do you do that at a lower price?
Great question. And I think there's some challenge there, but only some. I don't think it's a big challenge. So to deliver a wow experience, the first thing I have to do is I have to see the experience, see the issue from the other person's point of view. I come to the party with my perspective. The other person comes to the party with their perspective. Between the two perspectives, which one is most important? Always theirs. Your husband's, your wife's, your child's, your prospect, your customer, your teammate. Okay. And just in basic human relations, I'll tell you most of the time, they don't really care about your perspective. They only see theirs. And so once you begin to see things from their standpoint, okay, you kind of have a direct line to wow. Okay. And it doesn't necessarily have to be luxury. It has to be thoughtful and romance. And in my book, Romancing Your Customer, I have a lot of people who come and tell me, so, you know, Don, that works at home too. I was like, oh, shocker, you know, a little romance will work, you know, just about everywhere. But here's a really good example. So Chick-fil-A, who I've met with the C team at Chick-fil-A, and they will tell you that they sell all that chicken because they have the best chicken in the world. Well, I've had chicken in Florence, Italy, and I assure you, Chick-fil-A is not the best chicken in the world. The best chicken in the world is in Florence, Italy. Okay, my opinion. But the average Chick-fil-A sells like 4.8 million a year in annual sales, and if you take the mall locations out of the mix, it's almost 6 million. Now, the average McDonald's does about 2. So, who's the all-time king of fast food in America? Well, in the world, really. McDonald's. They've done more than everybody, yet Chick-fil-A almost triples their average volume on standalone stores. Now, is it because they have the best chicken in the world? I don't think so. I think it's good chicken. It's good chicken, but it's not Florence. Okay, but it's good chicken. But here's what they do exceptionally well on a fairly low price product. When you pull up to the drive-through, they walk up to your window. And what's the first thing they say? What's your name? Okay. Well, psychologically, we love to tell people our names. That's human nature. I love to say Dawn. They say, hi, Dawn. I'm like, hi. Okay. And that makes all my little receptors, my brain go happy. And they take my order. Okay. And I pay with a card there or pay cash. And before I even get to the drive-through window, they're walking up to my vehicle and they're handing me my number 2 or 7 or whatever it is. And they're so darn polite. I say thank you. And they say what? No, they say my pleasure. They never say you're welcome. They always say my pleasure. And so I think they triple the undisputed king of fast food in all of history with good manners. Not because they have the best chicken. And that's how they deliver that wow experience. They treat my time like I'm really important, which of course I think I'm really important. They get people through it. If you have Chick-fil-A where you live, look how many cars they process in a minute at the drive-through. It's earth shattering. Okay. And so they're quick, and they're nice. And that's how they deliver it. And in your business, you can find a way to do it too. And it doesn't really matter what your price point is.
And what's interesting too is they, on average, pay more for their workers than the average QSR companies. So it's kind of like they're grateful for their employees, which kind of creates this virtuous cycle.
And it starts all the way at the top. To be an owner, okay, you have to be in a 2-year management program. You're not guaranteed to be an owner, okay, because you're in competition with other people in the management program. And at the end of the 2 years, you're either offered ownership in a store or you're not. And if you're not ever. Okay. And then your buy-in is a whopping $10,000. They fund everything else. And this is not a commercial for Chick-fil-A. It's just a great story of American business. They fund everything else, and you own 49% of the profit stream of the business. You own none of the real estate, none of the hard assets. You own the profit stream. And so when you retire, okay, you basically walk away. All right. But the average owner makes almost $1 million a year.
That's amazing.
Not bad selling chicken. Even if it's not the world's best chicken, even if it's just good chicken.
Thank you so much, Don. So what's the one thing? So first, I've included in the comments the link to your book. You're discounting it for a whopping 99 cents for everyone who's participated in these calls, either on live stream or whatnot.
Amazon won't let me give it to you for free.
Yes, and all of the proceeds are going to St. Jude, so you're not profiting from this. How else can we help you? Tell us how we can support you, this community.
Oh my gosh. It's always the hardest question. What do you want? And so let's just talk about the book. Share your own, email me, LinkedIn, Facebook, however you want to. Smoke signals. I'll watch the western sky. Okay. Share a gratitude story with me. Whether you want it to be in a book or not, doesn't matter. I just, I'm so passionate about the power of gratitude in my own life and what it's done for me and in the people that I've been kind of the Johnny Appleseed of gratitude, the chief evangelist of gratitude. And so I know it will have huge impact in your life and in anybody's life you choose to share your gratitude with. And so
let me give them a directive. If you can, and if you enjoyed Don's conversation in the book, post about his book or post about his talk or talk about gratitude and link Don, link the Amazon book in the comments. And that's how you can kind of support Don and his message. And everyone, if you can now put this in gallery mode and put your video on so that we could give and unmute yourself, because we need to give Don a big round of applause. If you can unmute yourself, turn on your videos. Thank you, Don.
Thank you so very much. My pleasure to be here today.
You. And thank you so much for everyone who's coming and support Don in his book. Buy his book now, 99 cents to St. Jude's. And I will see you guys at the next, I think we have a micro learning next Tuesday on curiosity. Thank you everyone for coming. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Don. You're
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We're grateful for you.
I'm back at you.